What's up, everybody? So it was claimed in 1885 that a guy in Moberly, Missouri, found an entire pre ancient city 360 feet down a coal mine. This was printed in several newspapers, the New York Times included, but then eventually they said, no, it was just a April Fool's Day prank. A little late, though, because it was published on April 8th. I mean, I understand not meeting deadlines sometimes, but a week after April Fool's Day is a little late. But here's the deal, there's a lot of crazy stories from the 1800s, and they say that all of them were made up. Well, I kind of doubt that's the case, and everybody's heard of the Smithsonian's great contribution to the past by just taking and stowing everything away where nobody can see it. So it's a little hard to know which stories to believe and which not to. I mean, they did do hoaxes back in the day, like the Cardiff Giant. And hey, if there's enough people out there wanting to believe something and there's a way to profit off of that, then somebody will give the people what they want. There's whole genres on this platform dedicated to those matters. With the Cardiff Giant, the guy started a traveling circus sideshow kind of thing, charging a dime to come in and see the giant or whatever. But what's different about the Moberly claim is the owner of the land didn't want people to come around, didn't want any attention. So, the whole Quo Bono, who benefits thing doesn't apply because the guy wasn't looking to get anything out of this. This is also in the same region where I recently did a video about them finding 6 forests vertically stacked. So you had an entire forest grow and then get mud flooded out, grow another one, happen again. And this has just been discovered in the last few years. So there is a precedent here for things getting buried. I mean, we've got 6 entire forests on top of each other. And, well, what about the people that lived around there? Well, their houses and towns are going to get buried right alongside of it. So I don't know if this is real or if it's fake. So just take it with a grain of salt. But here's the claim. The city of Moberly, Missouri is stirred up over the discovery of a wonderful buried city at the bottom of a coal shaft 300 feet deep, which was being sunk near the city. A hard and thick stratum of lava, which arches in the buried city, the streets of which are regularly laid out and enclosed by walls of stone, which is cut and dressed in very good, although rude style of masonry. A hall 30 by 100 feet was discovered, wherein were stone benches and tools of all descriptions for mechanical service. Further search disclosed statues and images made of a composition closely resembling bronze, lacking luster. A stone foundation was found located in a wide court or street, and from it a stream of perfectly pure water flowing, which upon being tested was found to be strongly impregnated with limestone. The most wonderful of all was lying beside the fountain, the portion of a skeleton of a human being. The bones of the leg were measured, and femur measuring 4½ feet, the tibia 4 feet and 3 inches, showing that when alive, the figure was 3 times the size of an ordinary man and possessed of a wonderful muscular power and quickness. The head bones had separated in 2 pieces, the sagittal and the cornal suturus having been destroyed. The implements found embraced bronze and flint knives, stone and granite hammers, metallic saws of rude workmanship but proved metal, and others of similar character. They are not so highly polished, nor so accurately made as those now finished by our best mechanics, but they show skill and an evidence of an advanced civilization that are positively wonderful. The searching party spent 12 hours in the depths and only gave up explorations because of the oil in their lamps being low. No end to the wonderful discovery was reached. The facts above are vouched for by Mr. David Coates, the recorder of the city of Moberly, and Mr. George Keeling, city marshal, who were of the exploring party. A further extended search will be made in a day or two. All right, I'm going to start off with this. Everybody sees today how any form of mass media is just utter deception. And so they think it must have been much worse a couple hundred years ago because, nobody was there to fact check you. It's the opposite. People actually had integrity back then, and people don't even know what that is today. I grew up, mainly in the 90s in the Ozarks. I don't know if Moberly's still in the Ozarks up there, but it's pretty close. But if the recorder of the city and the city marshal were caught fabricating a story like this, they'd have to leave because it would have shamed the town so much. There would have been people out. Their house would have had an accident involving flames. And I'm really not kidding about that. You don't understand the mentality of the old Bible Belt. Most people don't anyway. And this is a generational thing that I've noticed just from my generation X to nowadays is you'd still get your butt kicked for being a liar back in the 90s. And now nobody's even worried about it. You can't even call them out. You're an a-hole if you call out somebody for being an outright liar. But I'm just telling you the old school mentality of Americans living in a small town and being caught up in a lie, especially something of this magnitude that reaches national newspapers, would completely ruin your reputation. And even the guy that printed this article probably got fired over this one way or another, whether it's true or not, just because of the who stepped in to say that it wasn't real. But I find it odd that two men with city jobs would just make this up. And then they say that it was an April Fool's Day joke, right? Well, that'd be a risky joke for a couple of guys that held city positions, but also it was published on April 8th. So the newspaper editor would have to be a complete idiot to run this a week late. Now, at this time, literally everybody in the Midwest had heard about the ancient giants that lived here. These photos I'm showing here are just some of the thousands of mounds that used to be in the Midwest, and they've erased almost all the evidence of it. They left like Cahokia Mounds and Poverty Point. Abraham Lincoln just casually mentions in a speech, the eyes of that species of extinct giant whose bones fill the mounds of America have gazed on Niagara as our eyes do now. And you can see from this photograph that people used to hold these giants in very high regard. These were the sons of God, the men of old, men of renown. Even though this one turned out to be a fake, they thought it was one of the real ones, which there were thousands of real ones out there. They've made just about everything interesting disappear off the internet, but I used to be able to pull up pictures of these roadside attractions in Ohio where somebody had an Indian burial mound on their land and would charge people a nickel to come in and see it or whatever. And there are probably hundreds of accounts of people genuinely finding giants' bones, 7 to 9 feet, I believe. Now, according to some of the old Native American legends, they say that they had built these ancient cities in America, and I'm assuming they're talking about the mound builders, but I'm not sure about that. What I am fairly sure about is whoever that culture was wiped out in the 1300s catastrophes. But then after that event, there was only a handful of these giants around, it sounds like. But they were all cannibals, and local tribes had to war with these people. Everybody's heard about Lovelock Cave, I'm sure. They finally got sick of all their people being eaten and got enough people together to trap them in a cave and set it on fire and smoked them out. Well, didn't smoke them out. They stayed in and. But then I've heard numerous other legends of them eating people. So I don't know if they were somewhat civilized until the change at the 1300s, but after that, all of the stories have them as very bad neighbors. There were still some alive when Magellan was sailing around Patagonia. That's literally named Patagonia is like Bigfoot, I think is the literal translation. But in his meeting, he describes them as civilized, basically, at least not trying to eat everybody. So everybody knew about the giants. It seems like they had basically just gone extinct. But this is still just who's living there in this last epoch. 360 feet down in a coal seam is like 10 mud floods ago or something, probably. And like I said, this is right next to where they found the 6 vertical forests on top of each other, only it was 120 years before this discovery. This is all right here in the Missouri, Kentucky, Ohio, Illinois basin, and it's where huge land masses all drain down to. We all just saw what happened in North Carolina. That was a couple days of pouring down rain, and I have read accounts from the 1300s where that lasted for 2 months. They say in England it stripped all the fields of their topsoil, but we all just saw what a couple days steady downpour can do up in the mountains. I'm sure you guys saw some of the video. It was just insane. There were just walls of mud and water coming down from the tops of mountains. People living in places where you would never even consider a flood. So who knows how many times this has happened, but when it does, it's all going to drain down into that area. Now, in Ukraine in 2018, they found evidently a wheel down in a coal mine, and this was found at a depth of 3,000 feet. And I got to say, when I see stuff like this, if it is real and it was really found at 3,000 feet, it just makes me think of Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita when he shows Arjuna his eternal form. Just the endless cycles of birth and rebirth, and eternity still just scares the crap out of me. But this is a literal history-shattering find, so of course they carefully cut it out and brought it up so we can get to the bottom of what this is, right? No. They tried to cut it out, but the sandstone was just too strong. So you guys managed to dig down 3,000 feet into the earth, but that rock is just too strong, can't get it out. So what are we going to do? Flood the tunnel. Yeah, they just shut down the whole operation. So if there ever was an authentic find like this, then it would be covered up. Now, I just read the short version of the story earlier, and I found this big, long write-up on it. It says it's a special correspondence of the Chronicle, and they go into a lot more detail than what was published there. So if you're sticking around, then we'll get into some of the particulars. But real quick, I want to throw in some of the weird geology of the Ozarks. You have all of these protrusions of this lava rock that they say is much older than all of the sedimentary rock on top of it. Of course, sedimentary is like it sounds. It forms from the sediments of water erosion or whatnot. This is what it would look like if everything were just flat surfaces. But the igneous rock wasn't flat. It had a topographical landscape. So it had hills and valleys. And then it all got covered over with sedimentary rock. Now, they don't explain how the sedimentary rock got there, but this was obviously from one of the same events that buried 6 forests on top of each other. And they know that all this sedimentary rock on top is younger than the older igneous rock. But after all the sedimentary rock was deposited there, then it starts raining again, and there are springs coming up out of the ground, so new rivers are forming, and it starts cutting out a whole new landscape, and it washes away all of the newer sedimentary rock to where you have all of the old igneous rock protruding out. So the evidence for flooding and sedimentary deposits being in this area is everywhere. This is a very interesting rock. I think it was called lapilli or something, but they say that this is believed to have agglomerated in midair during eruption. So this was shot up in the air as lava, then cooled off and formed into rocks in midair and then rained down. Some of these chunks are like 100 feet tall. So the accepted geological theories out there take into account major catastrophism back in the distant past. But then for the last 100 million years, it's just been this slow, steady, gradual, everyday. No, the evidence for recent catastrophism is everywhere. Now, back to this correspondence letter, they talk a little bit about the geology in there. He was digging the mine expecting to reach a 6-foot vein of bituminous matter, bitumen, believed to underlie this section of the country. In fact, it has been penetrated in some portions of the country, but its dip is so irregular that it is mere guesswork as to its depth. So just like in this example I used earlier where the older rock wasn't a flat surface. It's all hills and valleys, right? Well, there's a 6-foot thick deposit of bitumen, which is like a oily, coaly kind of thing that is just ancient compressed organic matter. But kind of what I'm thinking with that is that may only exist down in all of these low points where everything drained down to. That may be why they only find it in certain areas. Forests in coal mines have been found all around the world. This one's France, and then you can look it up and you'll find all kinds of these images. So it's quite common, apparently. And if there's anybody living there at that time, then their house is going to be buried too. Okay, so back to this correspondence letter. This thing is like 12, 15 pages long, probably. So that alone is a lot of effort to put into an April Fool's Day prank. You could have just, wrote a paragraph saying we found this. But he explains about the landowner, Tim Collins, and he had partnered up with multiple other people. They'd dig a while, didn't come up with anything, so that partner would bail. He got a new partner. Eventually, the mine flooded with 150 feet of water. They had to pump all it out. And finally, they hit a layer of this semi-liquid bitumen, which is black gold. Then, after reaching a depth of 360 feet, the workmen struck igneous matter of basaltic formation, so hard and firm that the picks and other instruments employed only overcame with difficulty. Saturday morning, Mr. Collins came into the city under a high state of excitement and announced to some of his personal friends that he had found a buried city at a depth of 360 feet. Of course, his friends laughed at his apparent delusion and thought the long strain had distorted his reason. But keeping the subject as quiet as possible, he invited his friends to visit his mine and verify his statements. Accordingly, a small company consisting of Charles F. Campbell, a prominent real estate dealer, R.A. Wilson, also a real estate dealer and experienced operator of coal mines, Gid Morehouse, and David Coates, George Keating, they list all of these people that live in this town. And like I was saying earlier, in a small town, everybody knows everybody. You're not friends with everybody, but you know of them. And these guys probably didn't want their names associated with a big hoax. But he goes into a lot of detail about getting down there. And finally, they entered a chamber of indeterminable extent, possibly 50 feet below the bottom of the mine. We had entered it had an irregularly arched roof. So it sounds like a natural cavern. And what he describes as putting obstructions here and there. These obstructions, viewed closely, proved to be walls that had evidently been constructed by the labor of human hands. So it sounds like this was a cavern with these walls jutting out in it. These walls were of Bala limestone, dark colored and hard, firm texture. Fragments of them were chipped off and brought to the surface, and it is completely different from the blue limestone that is found up in the surface in that area. These blocks are of irregular, triangular, and even oval, but were put there by the skill of those who understood the art of masonry. So he's describing polygonal masonry walls. I'm skipping over quite a bit here, but then moving along by this wall, the party in a short time came to an open space which was on inspection proved to be the entrance of a wide hall of the building we had just been inspecting. So this makes me think of the Roman underground. Under Rome, there are entire buildings that are empty on the inside that have been completely mud flooded on the outside, but people will rappel down into these huge cavernous man-made buildings underneath Rome. So it's not completely unheard of, but I mean, that would be extremely lucky just to have bored down and just happened to drop into an ancient building. When we entered the hall, the floor was smooth, and within a few feet from the entrance, there was not even an obstruction of dust. A large room, probably 65 by 100 feet in extent, showed itself dimly by the light of our tapers. It was about 20 or 25 feet from floor to ceiling and had evidently been lighted from the top, though there were openings in the walls where, from the appearance, great oaken blinds or doors had once been. These doors had rotted, and only a small portion of them remained, small bits of which we chipped off with our knives as souvenirs. Further examination showed that this room had been used as a workshop with tables and benches where they had fashioned their work of their hands. So great, they found an ancient factory. Tools were found on the benches, the handles of which had long since rotted away, but the tools themselves were in a good state of preservation and showed that they were fashioned by master mechanics. A number of them were brought to the surface and are now exposed to the gaze of the curious. So they're claiming that they actually brought back evidence. He then claims that one of the party wandered off into another area and says that he found a room partially filled with specimens of antique art. Small statuettes and larger statues met his gaze on every hand, and it was touching one of these, which fell with a loud crash, that he imperiled his safety. But he had made a little discovery which was worth a life to have made, though the accident extinguished his lamp. The noise of the falling statue and the frantic cries of Mr. Campbell caught the ears of the party, all of whom went to his assistance. On approaching the door, he warned to be cautious, not knock anything else over, but the party entered, and there were found numerous figures in stone and a species of bronze. The latter is not like that used in present day, but is a combination of metals, of which perhaps tin was the smallest ingredient, as it is devoid of luster. Several of the smaller images, some of them exceedingly grotesque in form, were secured by the party. So once again, they're saying that they brought evidence back of this. And, finding an ancient stone city is one thing, but then finding actual artwork and artifacts there, that's a whole new ballgame. So they're down there with oil burning lamps, and the oil's starting to run out. But the party showed that we were approaching midnight, but still none of us were anxious to go above till we had more than satisfied ourselves that our senses were not deceiving us, and that we were in our own persons actually and undoubtedly processed of tools, implements, and images made ages ago by an unknown prehistoric race. Accordingly, we began the ascent, carrying with us the unquestionable evidences of the wonders we had found, and reached the surface of the earth at 6 o'clock this morning, having been entombed 13 hours, but with a knowledge of facts that reach back in history for eons. So just trying to visualize everything he's describing here, it almost sounds to me like it's an intentionally buried cavern. People have built stuff underground for ages. I mean, look at like Malta. Literally all around the world, we have intentionally buried caverns. And I think it's still in the realm of possibility that ancient societies could have built entire underground cities like the legend of Agartha and have been underground for, ages. So I do think it's possible, but also it's a story that I want to believe. And when I want to believe something, then I scrutinize it twice as hard because that automatically makes me biased in the matter. The final word in all of this is from Tim Collins, the owner of the mine, in the Daily Evening Bulletin, April 13th. And he states that the sensational story of a buried city being discovered under his coal shaft is a sheer fabrication designed to do him great injury. No such discovery or anything like it, he says, has been made. The names of the parties given are fictitious. Okay, one, that could completely be the case. It could have been a story started by somebody just to make him look bad. But if it were my property, I would do the exact same thing. I would say, nope, ain't seen nothing. I mean, unless you want your front yard to be a 24/7 Disneyland, while a couple of hundred Pinkerton detectives are down underneath your land digging out every last shred of evidence, then you have to deny that it's there in the first place. So I don't know. It is an extraordinary claim. There was the wagon wheel found down in a coal mine. Who knows what all else has been found and successfully hushed up. And this reminds me of the thing that I found out cruising through the desert somewhere, nowhere, Arizona. They've got this roadside attraction. It's a gas station with like a museum off to the side of it. And you walk through all of these exhibits, and I mean, they have all of human history on there. Only it is told through the lens of this millions and millions of year old battle that's been raging between the aliens that came down to Earth and the dinosaur reptilians. And I can't remember the whole shtick, but it was just so well done. I wanted to meet the guy behind it. Because aside from the kind of funny, hokey parts like this, there were some real truth nuggets in those exhibits there. They don't have a picture of the thing itself on here, but finally you get back to the very end of this, and it's just a small room, and behind this glass case, it looks kind of like a little wicker basket or something. But it says that this man-made object was found like 2,000 feet down in a mine, and that during World War II, Roosevelt and the Austrian painter and all of these big wigs were looking for this object. And then it basically says, what if the only way to keep this thing safe was to build a roadside attraction so that everybody saw it? And I'm not doing this any justice here. This was really, really well done. But basically the claim was that they found something that is impossible according to our historical narrative. And here in the middle of nowhere on the side of the road, they're showing you a ancient artifact that pretty well proves life on Earth has been here for millions and millions of years to be mud flooded that deep. So anyway, that's the story of the alleged Moberly mine. And I don't know if it's true or not, but I found it entertaining and hope you guys enjoyed the video. I'll catch you on the next one. Static out.